but hello and welcome. My name is Shannon. My pronouns are they, them. And today we have a restorative practice focused on introspection. So we'll be looking inward, checking in with the body, maybe checking in with the mind, with our feelings, seeing if maybe they're connected. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. In my experience, they usually are, but that's me. For you, it might be different. So, again, props, a bolster or maybe a couple of larger pillows, um, maybe a couple of blocks or smaller throw pillows, and a couple blankets. And if you're practicing in a chair, you might want a second chair just to assist with a twist or fold, but it's not necessary. If you don't have one, that's okay. You can also practice on the edge of a chair, or you can practice in bed if you don't want to be on the floor. So we've got lots of options. And I'll be talking through, if not demoing, most of them. So we'll start with our grounding today. And for our grounding, if we like, we can begin in a reclined posture. Our first asana will be reclined. So sometimes people like to, oh, I'm just going to go down and stay down. No problems. But if you'd rather be seated for the grounding and then transition to reclined, you can do that as well. So I'll give everyone a moment to come into whatever starting position feels good for them. If we're reclined, we might have, excuse me, a bolster or pillow under our knees. We might cover ourselves with a blanket if we are feeling chilly, or we might have a blanket under our head if we'd like a little extra cushion. If we're seated on our chair, couch, edge of the bed, we might place our feet on the ground, or we can lift them up on the chair in front of us, ottoman, and then maybe recline back slightly against the back of the chair or the wall or whatever we have available to us and find a comfortable position. And if you're seated, any seated position that feels good for you. We might notice the space around us. Notice any sounds in the space, any sounds outside the space. So I live in the city. I hear sirens and people talking, and probably you'll hear a few car horns, and that might come through your speakers. But notice the sounds in your space as well. We don't want things to necessarily surprise us. If we haven't already, we might close the eyes if that feels good, or we can find a soft gaze if we'd rather keep our eyes open. We might take a few moments to notice the weight of the body against the object that we're sitting or resting against. So maybe the floor, maybe the bed, maybe the chair. And we might let ourselves ground down through those spaces, allow ourselves to really be heavy, to be supported, to let go as much as we feel like we can. And we might take a few deep breaths, maybe in through the nose, out through the mouth. Maybe releasing with a sigh or vocalization. Oh, letting go of the day so far. We can take as many of these breaths as we need. And then when we're ready, we'll find our natural breath, whatever that feels like for us in the moment. And maybe on our exhale, we'll continue to release down into the mat, into the bed, into the chair. Continue to be heavy, to be supported. Letting ourselves sink with each exhale. We might take a moment and notice the body. Notice any sensations we feel in the body. We might feel the pressure of the body against the mat, the floor, or the chair. We might notice the cool air on our skin or the weight of a blanket on the body. We're not judging, we're noticing. We might notice anywhere that we feel any strong sensations, if anywhere feels stiff or sore or tender. We might make note of those areas so that we can be as kind to ourselves as possible today. And once we've made note, we might notice how we feel in terms of our emotions. We might notice if maybe we're a little more upbeat, or maybe a little more anxious. Maybe we had a rough day and we have that cloud kind of hanging over us. And again, we're not striving to change. We're noticing or holding space for whatever that is. Acknowledging one big feeling or emotion and then moving on to the next. Maybe seeing if we can notice it as an observer rather than a participant. But that can be hard some days. And if that feels inaccessible today, that's okay too. We'll notice that as well. We might take a moment to notice the state of the mind. Do we have 1,000 thoughts rushing through our head? Do we feel kind of quiet and dreamy? Do we have any thoughts that are persistent? Again, we can acknowledge those things. We can name them and move on to the next one. And maybe we can name them all, and maybe we can't. And that is fine. That is normal. And we might return to the breath, noticing the inhale and the exhale. We might notice how they feel to us in this moment. We might notice if the exhale still has that moment of release. Do we feel it in the entire body? Or is it something that's kind of taking care of itself and not really part of our awareness? if we like, and only if this is something that sounds like we want to do, we might see if we can bring the breath down into the diaphragm, down into the belly. We might place our hands on the belly if that's helpful. Sometimes having that sense of touch helps us pull the breath down deep. And as we continue to breathe, we might also notice if we're breathing through the nose or the mouth. And if it's comfortable, if it's something that we feel like is accessible to us today, we might consider breathing in and out through the nose. Inhaling, pulling the breath down into the belly, and releasing. Beautiful. From here, we might transition to our first posture. If we're reclined, we might remove the bolster from behind the knee if we have it placed there. If we're laying on a blanket, we can keep our head there if that feels comfortable. If we're seated, we might sit a little bit more upright. We might raise the arms overhead, take a nice big breath, a nice long stretch out through the fingers, out through the toes. Beautiful. We'll take one more deep breath. And if we're reclined, we'll bring the arms and the legs towards the right side of the body, making a crescent moon shape and holding there. If we're seated, we might place the right arm down on the mat next to us or on the chair next to us, reaching the opposite arm up and over towards the right side, coming into a lateral stretch and holding here. And as we're holding, we might notice the breath. And as we pull it down to the diaphragm, we might notice the expansion of the ribs. And the softness as we exhale. We might let that awareness reach out from the breath into the rest of the body. Just noticing where you might feel a little tightness, where we might feel a bit of release. And on our next inhale, we'll straighten, bringing the arms overhead, the legs outstretched. And on our next exhale, coming over towards the opposite side. If we're seated, planting that left hand down on the chair or arm next to us and stretching the right arm towards the left side of the body. Continuing to breathe here. Again, noticing how the expansion of the ribs with the breath feels on this side of the body. Might feel the same, might feel different. We can look up, we can look to the side, whatever feels good on the neck. Beautiful. When we're ready, we can stretch back out Take a nice long stretch like we started with, and then release the arms down. Beautiful. If we are seated on the mat, we're going to transition into our next posture. So we might gently press up to seated while we get ourselves set up. But we're going to be coming into a supported twist. So we can take our bolster or our bed pillows and maybe place them down lengthwise onto the mat. And if you want to stay reclined, I'll also offer in just a moment an option for that. So here we're going to bring again the bolster or bed pillows lengthwise against the body. I'm starting on my right side, but if it's easier for you to start on the left, you can do that as well. We're going to do both sides. So this is option one. Option two is to create our ramp. So using our blocks, we can bring it into our L shape, or we can prop one or two of our little pillows underneath until we get a ramp. But whether we have our bolster or pillows on the ground or on our ramp, we're going to follow the same movements from here. So we'll bring our right hand or left hand, if we're on the left, down behind our bolster, coming onto the side body. And we have a couple options here. Place the legs anywhere that feel comfortable. So I like to start in this kind of deer legs posture where they're staggered, but you can have them stacked. And I'm going to either come down onto my side and then bring that left shoulder forward, coming into a twist, or from a semi-seated position, I'm going to bring my belly onto my legs so I have more movement from the side. I'm going to bring the heart space in the direction of my bolster and then slowly lower down, bringing my forehead down to the bolster or my cheek. Now from here, I might bring the legs into a stacked position or anything that feels comfortable. We can even stretch them out. And the mic's going to get muffled in a moment for me to demo, but you'll be in your twist. If you are reclined, you might be on your back, so you'll raise the knees, lower the feet on the ground, and you can either stay like this, or you can bring the knees down towards the right side of the body, coming into a reclined twist. So if your knees are hovering, you might use a pillow, blanket, bolster under the knees to support them. If we're in our chair, we'll be seated with our back straight, feet on the floor. And then we will rotate the upper body towards the right side. We can fold over an armchair. We can have our bolster next to us, and we can hold on to the bolster as we come into our twist to find a more a more kind of restful position. And once we found our twist, whatever it looks like, excuse me, we'll take again maybe a few deep breaths, maybe in through the nose, out through the mouth. And on our exhale, releasing the body into the props, allowing them to support us, allowing them to hold us. And then return to either our natural breath or our in through the nose, down to the belly breath. And we'll take a moment here to notice what's happening in the body. We might notice tightness. We might notice a bit of discomfort at the beginning of our twist as those areas that are tight start to stretch a bit. And we might notice that the longer we're here, the more we breathe, the more we let go, that the discomfort might begin to fade. The more we sit with it, the more we hold space for it and maybe try to make ourselves a little bit more comfortable by making any adjustments that we need. We might start to notice that discomfort kind of very slowly but consistently drifting away. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the position's a little uncomfortable to hold. We might notice the difference between discomfort and pain. And if we're feeling any of those sharp sensations, we might ease back a bit, maybe grab another blanket, put it on top of the bolster. Because discomfort is kind of part of the process of letting go. But pain is unnecessary in this situation. And we'll be here for the next couple moments, about 2 to 3 minutes, before we move into the posture on the opposite side. From here, we might take a deep inhale, exhale. We might press the hands down into the mat or against the props and gently press up. We can either roll onto the opposite side or rebuild the props on the other side of the mat, whatever feels most comfortable. If we are reclined, we might gently lift the knees back, move any props like pillows or bolsters to the opposite side, and then rest our knees down on the left side this time. If we're seated, of course, we're coming back through center. If we're using our bolster or pillow, we'll set that up on the opposite side and come into our twist on the opposite side. So again, hand behind our support, rotating the upper body towards the bolster, and we're folding down onto the bolster or pillows. And we might take a moment to notice again how this feels initially in the body. We might notice our inhale and exhale. Maybe on our exhale, seeing if we can release a little more into the fold. Noticing those tight areas, and on the exhale, seeing if we can let go a little bit more. Again, we might notice that initial discomfort. And take a moment to discern that difference between discomfort and possibly pain. And if we are hurting or if it's extremely uncomfortable, we can make adjustments. We might lay another pillow on our stack so we're not folding quite as far. We might roll a little bit more onto the side, lifting the right shoulder, allowing ourselves to rest more on our side, just with the shoulder kind of intended forward. That might make a difference. And noticing if we are moving away from that pain or extreme discomfort into that very particular type of discomfort that we experience when we know that we're letting go of something, or that we experience when we know that it's kind of important for our growth or for our forward movement. And noticing how, when we're able to recognize that our discomfort is kind of taking place on the path to somewhere else, that sometimes it can be easier to sit with that discomfort. When we know it's there to help us stretch or to help us let go or to help us move to somewhere else in our life that we need to be, how sometimes it just feels easier to tolerate that discomfort. And we might notice the discomfort begin to fade as we start to relax, as the muscles start to loosen, as we start to rest into the posture. And it might happen slowly. It's there one moment. It's a little less the next. Sometimes it seems to happen immediately. We'll be here for another minute or so. We might slowly return to the breath, noticing our inhale and exhale. If we're seated, we might start to slowly rotate forward, or we might begin to press down against the mat. If we're on the mat or a bed, pressing ourselves up to seated. If we're reclined, we might gently stretch the body out, lowering the legs. We're going to set up in our next posture called Mountain Brook. So this might look a little different for everyone, but I'm going to start with my bolster or maybe bed pillow, and that's going to come on the south side of the mat, kind of below where my knees will go. I'm going to move my blocks out of the way, and I'm going to take one of my blankets. And whether we're seated or on the mat, we're going to roll our blanket. So I'm going to open it or fold it into this kind of rectangle fold. And then I'm slowly going to begin to roll it into kind of like a long sausage type shape. And this is going to go near the north part of the mat. And it's going to fall just below the shoulder blades. So our shoulder blades come like this. We're going to place it right beneath the shoulder blade. So if this is the bottom, right there. And we might need to adjust once we come down. For our remaining blanket, we can either pull it over us for warmth, or we can use it under the head as a pillow. So whatever feels comfortable. I'm always warm, so I would probably use mine behind the head. And just another little offering is that if you have your blanket, you can also maybe give it a little half roll and place the roll beneath the neck with the head resting down if you want just a little bit more support. Or you can double fold it, whatever feels good. If we are in our chair, we can take either our bolster or pillow or maybe our second blanket. We can place it on the floor and we can place our feet on top of it so we have somewhere soft to rest our legs. Or we can place our legs on the second chair that we have available to us, or our ottoman. And if we're in the chair, we're going to go ahead and take our mat or our rolled blanket and place it in that same spot against the back of the chair, the wall. So bringing it behind us, finding that space just below the shoulder blade, and resting back. So we want to have as much as we can, the base or our bum near the wall, and then the shoulders against the wall with just this blanket allowing us to come into a soft opening. Again, if we're on the mat, we can recline. Into our position. And again, making any adjustments we need once we're down here. So we might adjust our blanket so it's in the right spot. We might make sure that if we're using a head pillow, our blanket for a head pillow, that it is just at the head and maybe under the neck, but we want our shoulders against the mat if that feels comfortable. Our arms can bow into T, they can be next to us. Palms up might be a little bit more comfortable than palms down. And again, here we might take a few deep breaths, noticing the inhale, noticing the exhale, finding whatever breath feels most comfortable. Continuing to breathe. And we might notice where in the body we feel open, where in the body we feel stretch, where we feel like we've made space in the body. And how that feels in this moment. Is it something we're comfortable with, something we're not comfortable with? If we don't feel comfortable, we might see if we can bring the blanket or pillow on top of the body, maybe through the heart space, along the belly, particularly in the torso area, and see if that helps. Sometimes the opening feels good in the body, but we can feel a bit exposed. And by making that simple adjustment, sometimes it can help us relax a little bit more. We might notice if any particular thoughts pop up for us. And not that we're going to follow these thoughts, but we'll acknowledge them and then release them, moving on to whatever's next. And if our mind starts to wander, we can always come back to the breath to find ourselves in the moment, in the present. And we'll be here for the next 5 minutes or so. And when we're ready, we'll slowly begin to come back to the breath. Noticing our inhale and exhale. We might gently begin to roll off our props onto our right or left side. Maybe placing a hand down in front of us, coming up onto our forearm, taking a moment here. And then gently beginning to press upward. Moving any of the props out of the way. So from here, we're going to set ourselves up for our final resting position. So if we like, we can come into Savasana, maybe lying on our backs with a bolster or pillow under the knees. We can take our blanket, unroll it, and place it over the body. If we want a little extra warmth, we can continue to use our pillow as a blanket as a pillow if we like. Something I like to do sometimes is bring it into the half fold, place half behind the head, and then bring the other half so that it's coming over the eyes, kind of like a hood. And sometimes that can just help make the room a bit darker. It helps to muffle sound if there's lots of sound around so that we can rest. We can use an eye pillow over the eyes. If we're seated, we can take that rolled blanket, maybe put it around the neck as we lean back against the back of our chair. Or, of course, we can move to a more comfortable seat, maybe our couch. Reclining back. Anything that feels comfortable for us. And if Shavasana isn't a position that feels comfortable for you, you can choose any position you are comfortable in. Shavasana is time for us to integrate our practice to rest. So we want to be as comfortable as we can for that part of our practice. So we, again, might take a moment, notice if there's any other way that we can make ourselves just a little bit more comfortable. Maybe smoothing out clothing or making ourselves a little bit warmer. And we'll let ourselves fully arrive in the moment. Now that our journey of movement and asana is complete, we have nowhere to go, nothing else we need to be doing. We can allow ourselves to be here as we are. We might begin to soften into the shape that our body has taken, allowing our knees to be soft, our legs to be heavy, arms and shoulders to be heavy, feeling the weight of our body, of our bones surrendering into the earth. Noticing the ground beneath us, stable, constant, holding us without conditions or expectations. We might let our breath become a quiet rhythm in the background. That ebb and flow that asks us for nothing and offers everything. As we rest here, we might begin to notice what sensations remain in our bodies. Are there places of warmth, of openness, maybe subtle vibration, warmth? We might even imagine ourselves collecting small impressions from our practice today, a moment of sensation here and insight, and gathering them all into the center of our heart space where they can settle and be held. There's no need to try to understand everything right now. We can trust that our body remembers. We can trust that our breath knows the way. This rest, this Savasana, is not separate from the work. It is the work. As we begin to transition, we can stay with our inner awareness, noticing the space inside of ourselves, noticing shifts, even small shifts. And we'll be in this space of awareness and rest for the next 4 minutes or so. We might begin to invite gentle movement back into the body. We might wiggle the toes or circle the wrists and ankles. We might let the breath deepen slightly as if we're breathing ourselves awake from the inside. Pulling the breath down, releasing with a sigh or vocalization. When we're ready, we might gently roll to one side, pausing there, maybe lifting the knees, curling the body into a soft embrace. Maybe taking a moment for integration, a little seal on our practice today. And then maybe slowly with care, only if we choose to. We, of course, can stay here as long as we want. We might press ourselves up into a comfortable seat. If we like, we can bring our hands together at heart center or place them anywhere against the body that feels good. And we'll take 3 breaths together in a way that feels comfortable for us. May the insights that we've gathered stay with us. May we carry our awareness into the rest of our week with gentleness. And may we continue to return to ourselves again and again. We might take a moment to thank ourselves for our practice today, for making this space for rest and introspection. And I'd like to thank you so much for sharing your practice with me today. Again, it means so much to me. I'll be here for the next few minutes if anyone has